My name is Clara Reynolds. For years, I have paid for every one of my sister's birthday parties, from the cake and decorations to the champagne she never thanked me for. This year, I wanted things to be different. I booked the entire restaurant, arranged every detail, and told myself that maybe this time she would finally see me as part of the family. When I arrived, the valet took my keys and the doorman checked the guest list before calling security. Something in his expression told me something was wrong. Then I heard her voice behind him, calm and confident as if she had practiced it. "She's not allowed in." I froze. My sister stood there in a shimmering gold dress, smiling as if nothing about the moment was cruel. My parents were beside her, silent and motionless. Then my father laughed quietly and said, "You really thought you were welcome?" My mother gave a small smile, her eyes showing no hint of sympathy. I waited for someone to say something to remind them that I was the one who paid for everything. No one spoke. The security guard looked at me with an apologetic face and told me I needed to step back. I turned and walked toward the parking lot. The music inside faded as the doors closed behind me. Sitting in my car, I opened my phone, typed a message, and pressed send. The light from the screen reflected across the windshield as I took a slow breath, uncertain whether I felt anger or emptiness. 30 minutes later, something happened that none of them would ever forget. If you were in my place, kicked out of the very party you paid for, what would you do? Share your thoughts in the comments. I truly want to know whether you would stay silent or fight back. I drove home in silence, my mind heavy with the echo of their laughter. I kept replaying that moment at the door, searching for a reason why I still expected them to treat me as family. When I reached my apartment, I felt drained, as if every bit of energy had been stripped from me. I dropped my keys on the counter and saw the folder waiting on my desk. Inside it were every invoice, receipt, and email confirmation for the party I had paid for. I sat down and flipped through the papers one by one. Each sheet carried my effort flowers ordered weeks in advance, the designer cake, the rented restaurant, the custom decorations. I remembered how proud I had felt when everything came together perfectly. I had told myself that maybe this time my sister would thank me, that maybe my parents would finally see me. Instead, all I saw was the look on Maggie's face when she said I didn't belong there. That memory burned through me like acid. I closed the folder and stared at it for a while. The feeling that rose inside wasn't sadness anymore. It was disgust. Not at them, but at myself for allowing it to happen again. I picked up the papers and began tearing them apart. The sound was sharp, satisfying. The pieces fell into a pile on the table, white scraps covering the surface like broken promises. I tied them into a trash bag and set it by the door. The weight of it felt lighter than the burden I'd been carrying for years. I turned on my laptop. The glow of the screen filled the dark room as I opened my bank account. Maggie's name appeared again and again on the list of payments. Rent, phone bill, credit card, tuition, even small monthly transfers for her emergencies. I had made each one automatically without thinking. I stared at the list for a long time, my cursor resting on the cancel button. Then I pressed it. Each confirmation felt like closing a door. Rent canceled, credit card canceled, tuition canceled. The screen refreshed, leaving only my own expenses behind. I felt something shift inside me, not anger, not relief, but the kind of stillness that comes after a storm has spent all its power. For the first time, I realized how much of my life had revolved around keeping them happy, buying peace that never lasted. I picked up my phone. The chat with Maggie was still open from days ago, filled with short, polite messages that never meant anything. I typed a single sentence: "Handle your own bills from now on." I read it twice, then sent it. There was no tremor in my hands, no doubt, just a sense of finality that felt almost clean. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly. The room was quiet except for the faint ticking of the clock. It was a sound I had never noticed before, steady and calm, as if time itself had been waiting for me to do this. I looked around the apartment, plain, small, but mine. No one could take that from me. I walked to the window. The reflection staring back at me was someone I barely recognized. The woman who used to buy affection was gone. What remained was tired but steady hurt, but no longer willing to kneel for acceptance. I thought about the years I had spent explaining, apologizing, fixing everything my family broke, all for the hope of belonging. That hope was gone now, and strangely, I didn't miss it. I whispered the words out loud, tasting them carefully as if they were a vow. I'm done funding my own humiliation. My voice didn't shake. It sounded firm, final, the kind of truth that doesn't need to be repeated. Morning light slipped through the blinds when I heard a knock on the door. It was soft at first, then grew more insistent. I hesitated before opening it, expecting silence. Maybe a package, but not her. Maggie stood there, clutching a bouquet of lilies wrapped in pale paper. Her eyes were red, her voice shaky. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside without a word. She walked in like someone stepping onto fragile ground. The smell of the flowers filled the room, too sweet, almost desperate. Maggie placed them on the table and turned to me. "I was wrong," she began. "I shouldn't have said what I did yesterday. It wasn't what I meant." I said nothing. She kept talking, her voice trembling between apology and justification. "You know how Mom gets, how Dad pushes. I didn't want to make things worse. I thought you'd understand." I watched her face as she spoke. There was a practiced rhythm in her words, the kind that came from someone used to fixing things with excuses, not sincerity. Her tears came easily, and for a moment I wondered if they were for me or for herself. She took a step closer, lowering her voice. "Clara, please. I can't do this without your help. Rent's due in a week, and my card's maxed out. You've always been the one I could count on. I'll change, I promise." The word promise hit me harder than I expected. I had heard it too many times. Promises of appreciation, of gratitude, of change. Every one of them had dissolved the moment she got what she wanted. I let her finish speaking, then took a slow breath before answering. "You'll have to stand on your own for once." My voice came out calm, almost gentle. But I saw the flicker in her eyes, hurt disbelief, and something sharper underneath. She stared at me for a few seconds, then scoffed. "So that's it. After everything I've been through, I didn't respond." She grabbed her purse, her tears vanishing as fast as they had appeared. "You think you're better than me now, don't you?" Her tone cracked. "Fine. Don't help me, but don't come crying when you end up alone." She stormed out the door, slamming hard enough to shake the frame. For a long time I didn't move. The bouquet sat on the table, petals trembling slightly from the draft. I thought about throwing it away but didn't. Instead, I made coffee and sat by the window. The apartment was quiet again, the kind of quiet I had longed for. I told myself this was peace, not emptiness. That illusion lasted until later that afternoon. My phone buzzed nonstop with notifications. At first, I ignored them, assuming work emails or reminders. Then I saw Maggie's name trending on social media. She had posted a long caption under a photo of herself crying, claiming her jealous sister cut her off financially out of spite. She didn't mention my name, but the details were too specific to mistake. "Some people act generous just to hold power over you," she wrote. "And when you stop worshiping them, they show their true face." The comments came fast. Friends, acquaintances, even strangers chiming in, calling her brave, calling her sister cruel. I read every word without flinching. For years I had been her silent benefactor, the invisible hand that kept her life from falling apart. Now she had turned me into a villain to feed her own story. I closed the app not out of anger, but final understanding. I deleted her number, her messages, her contact from every account. It wasn't rage that guided me, just the certainty that I was done playing her part. I walked to the trash and dropped the bouquet inside. The flowers were already wilting, their stems bending under their own weight. For the first time in years, I felt something close to freedom. It didn't roar or announce itself. It just settled quietly like air filling a space that had long been empty. The next morning began like any other. I was brewing coffee when my laptop chimed with a new email. The sender's name stopped me mid-motion. Jenna Myers. It had been years since we last spoke. She was a colleague from the firm I used to work for, someone who had quietly stood by me during long nights and silent humiliations I never shared with family. I hesitated for a second before clicking open. The subject line read, "You should see this." Inside was a short message. Found this while editing last week's event footage. You deserve to know. Below her note was a single video file labeled backstage to raw.move. My stomach tightened as I pressed play. The screen filled with shaky behind-the-scenes footage, decorators adjusting tablecloths, waiters carrying trays, the soft buzz of conversation before guests arrived. Then I saw her, Maggie, standing near the bar with two friends laughing, holding a champagne flute. Her voice came through clearly over the background noise. "It's her money anyway," she said, grinning. "She'll pay even if she doesn't come." The words hit me like a physical blow. For a moment I couldn't breathe. The laughter around her felt sharper than glass, each sound cutting deeper than the last. The video continued, showing her giving orders, posing for pictures, smiling for the camera, the perfect hostess of a party I had unknowingly funded for my own humiliation. I replayed the clip again and again as if repetition might dull the sting, but it didn't. The more I watched, the less anger I felt. What replaced it wasn't calm nor forgiveness, but a vast emptiness, a quiet realization that this had never been about misunderstanding. It had always been about entitlement. She never thought she had to earn anything because she knew I would always pay the bill, literally and emotionally. When I finally stopped the video, my coffee had gone cold. The email notification blinked again. Jenna had sent a follow-up. "I remember how proud you were when you told me about the party," she wrote. "You didn't deserve that. You deserved better." For the first time in a long while, someone said something that didn't sound like pity or judgment, just truth. I sat there for several minutes reading her message over and over. My reflection in the dark screen looked almost unfamiliar, someone quieter, older, steadier. I clicked download, saving the file into a new folder. Then I printed a still image from the video, Maggie laughing, glass raised midair, the exact moment she mocked me. I slid the photo into a folder labeled "For Later." As the printer hummed, my mind started to clear. Every scene from the past few weeks replayed itself like a puzzle, finally aligning: my parents' smiles, her fake apology, the online post, the endless cycle of blame and silence. I had spent my entire life walking away to keep peace that never existed. Every retreat had been mistaken for weakness. Every silence had been treated like permission. Not this time. I arranged the printed papers, neatly stacked them beside the folder, and closed my laptop. The evidence wasn't just proof of what she said. It was proof of who she really was, and of who I no longer had to be. I didn't know exactly how the next confrontation would unfold, but I knew it was coming. My parents would see the truth, not because I wanted revenge, but because they needed to stop believing her story. I placed the folder into my bag, zipped it carefully, and stood by the window. The world outside moved on as if nothing had changed, yet something inside me had shifted completely. For the first time, I wasn't the one running from the noise. I was ready to face it. I turned off the lights, picked up my keys, and whispered the words I had waited years to mean. This time, I wasn't walking away. The house looked exactly as I remembered, too clean, too quiet, as if it had been frozen in time. I parked across the street and sat for a moment, watching the lights flicker in the living room window. Inside, I could see my parents sitting together on the couch. The television was on, though neither of them seemed to be watching it. My mother's posture was rigid, my father's expression fixed in that familiar mask of detachment. When I knocked, there was a long pause before the door opened. My mother, Renee, greeted me with a cautious smile. "Clara." We weren't expecting you." Her tone carried the same politeness she reserved for neighbors or distant relatives. I stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. My father, Richard, looked up from the couch but didn't rise. The faint sound of a game show filled the silence between us. I didn't waste words. I set my bag down, pulled out the printed still from the video, and placed it on the coffee table. Then I opened my laptop and pressed play. The recording began, laughter, clinking glasses, the glitter of the party lights. And then Maggie's voice filled the room. "It's her money anyway. She'll pay even if she doesn't come." No one spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the television in the background. Renee shifted in her seat, glancing at my father as if silently asking him to do something. Richard leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the frozen frame of Maggie's smiling face on the screen. "Family issues shouldn't go public," he finally said, his voice low but firm. I looked at him for a moment, trying to read whether it was disappointment or defense I heard in his tone. "It's already public," I said quietly. "She made sure of that." Renee exhaled sharply, rubbing her temples. "You've always made things dramatic, Clara. You could have come to us before letting everyone know. Now people are talking and your sister's humiliated." I blinked in disbelief. She's humiliated. She staged a lie and used my name to build sympathy. My voice stayed steady, but every word felt heavier. "I'm not here to argue. I just thought you should see the truth." Richard sighed, the kind of sigh that ended every childhood argument I ever lost. "You girls have always been different," he said, not looking at me. "Maggie's impulsive, you're sensitive. That's just how it is." There it was, the same dismissal wrapped in the language of understanding. I had grown up in that tone. It had taught me to shrink my emotions into silence. This time, I didn't. "If you want to keep calling it family, then keep it private," I said. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my house key, and placed it on the table. "But do it without me." Renee's eyes widened. "Clara, don't be ridiculous." I met her gaze. "I'm not. I'm finished." I closed the laptop, slid it back into my bag, and stood. The weight of years seemed to lift slightly as I took a step toward the door. Richard didn't stop me. Renee called after me once, her voice soft, but not enough to make me turn around. Outside, the air felt sharper. I walked to my car, the crunch of gravel underfoot oddly comforting. My phone buzzed in my pocket just as I reached for the door handle. Maggie's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring until the sound faded into silence. Then I switched the phone off. Through the car window, I could still see the glow from the living room, my parents sitting where I'd left them, unchanged, unmoved, and unwilling to see. For the first time, I didn't feel anger, just finality. I started the engine and looked straight ahead. Whatever came next, I would face it alone, and that realization didn't scare me. It felt like freedom. A few days later, I received a message from Noah Bennett, a journalist I hadn't spoken to in years. He used to work with me at the community paper before moving to Denver Weekly. His message was brief. "Saw what's been happening. You deserve to tell your side." I hesitated before replying, unsure if I was ready to share more. But Noah wasn't the type to chase gossip. He always cared about the truth, and that was something I could trust. We met at a small cafe near the university. The conversation started cautiously. He asked how I was doing, and I said I was fine, though we both knew it was a lie. I handed him the folder that had become my armor, the printed receipts, the video, still, the statements. He studied each page with quiet focus. "You kept everything," he said softly. I nodded. It was all I had left to defend myself. Noah leaned back, thoughtful. "If we frame this as a story about financial manipulation inside families, not naming anyone directly, people will still understand. And you'll have control of the narrative." His words felt like a door opening after a long silence. I agreed. Over the next 2 days, we worked together on the article. I wrote my part as if I were writing to my younger self, the version of me that thought being generous meant being loved. Noah edited with care, trimming sentences but keeping the soul intact. When it was ready, we published it under the headline, "The Price of Family Loyalty." The story spread quickly. By evening, hundreds of comments flooded in sharing similar experiences. Siblings who drained savings, parents who played favorites, partners who took advantage. People weren't angry. They were relieved. They saw themselves in my story. And yet, as I watched the article climb in views, I realized something was still unfinished. The truth wasn't just mine to hide behind an alias anymore. That night, I opened my phone and created a live stream. No filters, no lighting, just me sitting at my desk. My hands trembled at first, but when the counter showed 200 viewers, then 2,000, something inside me steadied. I'm not here to accuse anyone, I began. I just want to talk about what happens when love and obligation blur together. I spoke slowly, explaining the events, how generosity became expectation, how silence became guilt, and how people can turn kindness into currency. As I talked, the comments section filled with hearts and words of encouragement. "You're brave. You're not alone. I went through this too." The numbers grew until I stopped looking. For the first time, I didn't feel like the invisible one. I felt heard. By the next morning, the live stream had gone viral. News blogs picked it up. Podcasts quoted it. The phrase "family financial gaslighting" began trending on Twitter. Maggie's PR firm released a statement denying involvement, but the damage was done. Screenshots of her old posts, her sponsorships, her smiling brand endorsements all flooded with comments. Within a week, her biggest client canceled their deal, followed by another. The company she worked with issued a quiet apology for misrepresentation. When I saw the headlines, I didn't feel victory, only clarity. The truth had moved on its own, faster than revenge ever could. That evening, I opened another short live session, not to continue the drama, but to close it. "I'm not here for revenge," I said, my voice calm. "I'm here for closure." The comments section flooded again, but I ended the stream after only a few minutes. As the screen faded to black, I looked at my reflection. The weight that had followed me for years, the guilt, the fear of being misunderstood, was gone. What remained wasn't triumph, but peace. I closed my laptop, took a deep breath, and finally felt what I had been chasing all along: the quiet power of letting go. Weeks passed quietly, yet the ripple kept spreading. One morning, I woke to a headline that made me sit up straight. "Local couple under tax investigation. Financial irregularities at R&R Consulting." The article named Richard and Renee Bennett, my parents. The report explained how years of underreported income and charitable deductions had triggered an audit. The journalist referenced a public discussion about family finances that had recently gone viral, though it didn't mention my name. The irony was almost poetic. The people who once told me to keep problems private now found their own exposed for everyone to read. In the following days, reporters camped outside their neighborhood. Richard's company statement claimed it was a clerical oversight, but the damage had already been done. Renee stopped attending her charity brunches, and their friends avoided eye contact in public. When the city tax office confirmed the penalty, it amounted to more than they could afford. They were forced to put their house on the market. Seeing the listing online felt unreal. The same house where every family dinner had turned into quiet judgment, now framed in bright real estate photos staged for strangers. Meanwhile, Maggie's story took a darker turn. After her sponsors withdrew, journalists began investigating her PR firm. Old clients spoke up about unpaid work, manipulated campaigns, and falsified endorsements. Her name started trending again, this time beside words like fraud and fabrication. I saw one clip of her leaving a studio, head down, sunglasses hiding her face, reporters shouting questions she couldn't answer. I didn't feel satisfaction, only a kind of weary recognition the truth has a way of catching up. My inbox filled with new messages, invitations to interviews, podcast requests, and offers from advocacy groups. I declined them all except one. A media company in Seattle reached out, offering me a position as director of communications for their transparency initiative. The role aligned with everything I had once dreamed of doing before my world revolved around cleaning up other people's chaos. When I accepted the offer, the HR director wrote, "Your story shows what integrity looks like under pressure." That sentence stayed with me more than any apology ever could. In the final week before I moved, I drove through Boulder one last time. The snow had begun to melt, revealing grass beneath months of white. Streets that once carried the weight of memory now felt strangely neutral, like pages ready to be rewritten. I packed the last box and turned off the lights in my apartment. As I checked my phone for directions, a notification appeared, one new message from Maggie. It read, "I didn't think you'd actually leave." For a long moment I stared at the screen. There was no anger left, no resentment, not even pity. Only understanding. Maggie had built her world around control, controlling narratives, people, and outcomes. My leaving wasn't just distance, it was proof that she no longer had any power over me. I deleted the message without replying. At the airport the next morning, the sky over the Rockies glowed pale blue. My flight to Seattle was boarding. I looked out the window as the plane rose above the clouds, Boulder shrinking into a patchwork of snow and rooftops. My chest tightened, not from grief, but release. For the first time, I felt untethered. As sunlight filled the cabin, I whispered to myself, leaving wasn't running away. It was freedom. The words felt light like air. The past had lost its grip, and what lay ahead was not revenge, not redemption, but a beginning. Life in Seattle moved quietly, almost like the city had been waiting for me to arrive. My new apartment overlooked a stretch of water that shimmered silver every morning. I kept my days simple, work walks, coffee with colleagues who knew nothing about my past. There were no dinner invitations I felt forced to attend, no family calls loaded with guilt. Peace, I learned, wasn't loud. It was steady. At work, I rebuilt what I had once lost: trust in myself. My team respected me not for what I had endured, but for how I worked. I no longer needed validation from anyone who measured worth through convenience or appearance. Each day as I closed my laptop, I felt a small, certain pride, the kind that grows quietly like roots beneath the surface. Sometimes, late at night, messages appeared in my inbox from people I had never met. "Your live stream helped me talk to my mother. I finally stood up for myself after watching your story. Thank you for showing that walking away isn't weakness." I read every one of them, sometimes smiling, sometimes crying, always humbled. Their words reminded me that what had once been my shame had become someone else's permission to heal. One evening after work, I opened an old notebook. Between the empty pages, I began to write, not to document pain, but to record perspective. My pen moved easily, the words forming without hesitation. Family isn't defined by blood, but by respect. I underlined it twice. That sentence felt truer than anything I had ever said aloud. Blood can bind, but respect is what sustains. Without it, even love decays. Weeks later, when my new colleagues suggested creating a short talk for the company's social channel, I agreed. Not a retelling, but a reflection. The studio was small, only a single light and a camera. I looked straight ahead and spoke calmly. "Thank you for staying until the end. If you've ever had to walk away to protect your peace, know this: you made the right choice." My voice didn't shake. For the first time, it sounded like someone who had stopped fighting ghosts. The clip went online that same night. Within hours, messages and comments appeared beneath it. Stories of boundaries, forgiveness, self-worth. I responded to one, then another, until I lost count. Finally, I wrote, "Share your thoughts below, I'll be reading them all." And I meant it. This wasn't about attention anymore. It was about connection, the kind that doesn't ask for anything in return. The next morning, I woke early. The city was still half asleep, the streets wet with last night's rain. I brewed coffee, tied back my hair, and stood by the door of my apartment. For a moment, I listened to the hum of traffic far below, to the quiet pulse of a place that now felt like home. Then I turned the handle and opened the door. Light poured in golden and soft. It brushed across the floor, the walls, and the edges of everything new. I stepped forward, letting it fill the space around me. There was no need for closure anymore. The story had already found its ending, not in revenge, not in loss, but in understanding. As the sun rose higher, I whispered one final thought to myself, a truth I had learned the hard way, but would never forget. Peace isn't something you find in others. It's something you choose every single day. And with that, I smiled. The door stood open, and for the first time in years, so did I.